Welcome to our special interview. Today we shall be interviewing a special guest, a free marketer, a believer of free market ideas and principles. He has traveled the entire world teaching about free market and advising different governments on the best principle, how to govern or conduct their own affairs. So today we are going to be discussing various principle ideas related to that. And allow me introduce to you a special guest from the United States of America.
Yeah.
And that is other than Professor Lingle. Welcome to our media house.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So introduce yourself to our viewers and tell them your story about what you do.
Yeah. I'm Christopher Lingle. I'm an academic economist. I have a PhD from the University of Georgia from 1976, before you were born.
Yes.
And most of my career has been spent outside the United States, in other countries, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, as a professor. And I'm semi-retired now, but I continue to engage these same ideas at conferences like yours. It's this wonderful Africa Liberty Camp that was attended by some 50 different young Ugandans who were interested in the ideas of human liberty and personal dignity. So I hope I tried to give them an overview of sort of set of principles that would guide you in deciding on how public policy and government, political governance should be carried on. If Uganda is ever going to be released from this deathly grip of poverty that afflicts and affects so many people here. It's something that is avoidable, but it's a matter of political choice to keep your country poor.
Okay. We are going to go deeper into our session today. Mm-hmm. But what is your philosophy? What drives your life?
Well,
what are those principles you believe as a person?
Well, as an economist, economists are really fundamentally concerned with human behavior. So Adam Smith was actually a moral philosopher, and he wanted to know, how do people live a good life, and how did they live a life with other people? So economics began with this deep concern with human decisions and human morality and human interactions. Now, almost every social scientist will pretend that they are also concerned with humanity. But in fact, if we look at the results, social science, sociologists tend to try to think in a high level of abstraction, society, community, that really is an abstraction and a conceptualization that is separate from humanity, because they're trying to look at a forest without understanding the trees. Anthropologists, I think, suffer from this as well. But economists should be constantly interested in how individual humans interact with other individual humans. And that's what we call the market process. The market process should be at the heart of all economics. So my concern is to try to find ways to make certain that people can engage in the market process in a way that fulfills their own life purposes. And of course, those life purposes are limited to peaceful life purposes. Everyone understands that violent aggression is not acceptable.
So you agree that we should let the market play its role. What about some weakness of the market?
Well, market.
How do we iron them out? Like
if
cheating, like poor quality, like robbery. How do we iron out that?
To understand the market process is to try to understand humanity, to understand human action. The people that oppose markets oppose humans. They oppose human actions. I believe that in order for people to be prosperous, they must be free. They must be able to go into the market and express themselves and seek things that they need and people that will cooperate with them to provide what they need. Now, because it's a human process, it's imperfect. But it has some self-correcting mechanisms that make those imperfections less problematic than, say, political governance. Political governance is very imperfect. It lacks the self-adjusting mechanisms. We have to wait for another election cycle to vote again, to throw out corrupt politicians. The rules are very complex, and so political governance is imperfect, but very difficult to escape. Now, market processes are imperfect, but if you cheat me in the market, if you abuse me in the market, I can avoid you because I don't have to do business with you. I can do business with someone else. So when there are imperfections in the market, there are adjustments that people can make to get away from these imperfections, so that we're constantly searching for a sort of balance of cooperation and competition in the market that allows people to engage in cooperative exchange to make their lives better.
Yeah, we have a system called capitalism. Capitalism, over a quarter, a century, has lifted millions of people out of poverty. And the other side is socialism. Wherever it has been, communism, the Soviet, the early China of Chairman Mao, it has killed millions of people, has caused misery, hunger, and poverty. But the system, capitalism, which has lifted millions of people out of poverty, has been bashed, name-called, and abused as a system of greed. Why do you think people abuse capitalism, and how can we correct that picture from the people?
Well, again, it's a misunderstanding. If you think of markets as simply humans interacting with one another, how can you be opposed to that? Because humans should be able to live their own lives. Now, if you think of the market as some kind, or capitalism as some sort of concept that is that has certain characteristics that people will put into it. I mean, capitalism is nothing more than private property and human liberty in combination. So that within that context, private property gives people a way to resolve conflicts over the use of scarce resources.
That is the moral nature of private property.
I'm sorry, what's?
That is the moral nature of private property.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
how is rule of law related to capitalism or free market?
Well, the rule of law is it's a metaphysical, it's a grand concept that goes beyond this thing that most people call legislation. Legislation is an invention of rules by individuals or an elite that they impose on other people. Now, the rule of law was something that evolved from humans interacting on one another. It wasn't imposed by some political party or people with an ideology, as we see with parliamentary legislation. The rule of law was a discovery of how people could live a good life, a better life, by respecting one another's rights equally, and that any kind of rule that applies to you applies to me. No matter if I'm stronger, taller, more powerful, richer, or if I'm a government official, I have no more rights than you have. And this is what is why I really don't understand that people will find an attraction to socialism or some form of collectivism which subjugates the individual to a bigger picture.
Oh, you talked again about socialism. Why are people not willing to learn from the history? Because, as I said, the unprecedented moral, or evil of socialism and communism has been hunger in China, North Korea, the Soviet, East Germany. the result we see is poverty, hunger, that you said. Why are people not willing to learn from that history? Why did the socialists give people great indoctrination, great propaganda that people do not learn from history?
You know, in a way, it's a funny thing in a way. Now, in my family, I'm a communist. I'm deciding who gets what. And, you know, but my powers are limited. Now, in the community, I might be a social democrat because I would maybe help someone that I believe needs my help. I wouldn't insist that you help someone unless you wanted to. Now, but in a political framework, I'm a libertarian, in the sense that no one should decide for everyone else what is good for them. So I think what happens is people don't escape that sort of naive exposure to a family setting. So they want to imagine that the community is like a family. There's one father who tells everybody what to do. That works in most families, but it doesn't work as a community or a political system. And I think this is what the problem is. So, in other words, many people are guided by emotion rather than reason. And David Hume, a great Scottish philosopher, was one of the first philosophers to discuss it, that reason emotions overwhelm your reason. So people come with this sort of sympathy. They try to look at society as, oh, it's just a big family. No, it's not a big family. It's a group of individuals that are acting and interacting differently with different motivations. So you can't run society the way you run a family.
Yeah,
and communism may work in a family, but it will never work in a community.
That is what we call group liberty. So I think you're talking about group liberty. That is family arrangement.
Yeah.
Where when you are in a group, you lose some liberty because of the arrangement. There is a strict order you must follow because you agreed to be in that group. That's what I understand by the communism as in the family. So what philosophy inspires you as far as free market ideas are concerned? What philosopher?
Well, you know, in a way, I didn't begin my economics career in terms of making moral judgments or looking for a philosophical framework. I'm a bit of a contrarian. That is, I always questioned what people would tell me, and I always resisted authority. So I didn't get along well with my parents. I had a terrible time with my teachers because I resisted authority. So in a way, these are sort of defects. These are personality defects. But they worked in a positive way for me to say, well, look, I don't believe that everything people tell me is true. I want to see something else. I don't believe everything that someone with authority says is correct, so I didn't trust government. And then I began reading about, for example, public choice economics was a way of applying economics to political processes. Then I read the great Austrian scholar, Friedrich Hayek, who introduced me as an economist into sort of social and political and moral philosophy. And then I read Ludwig von Mises, another 20th century Austrian economist, who gave me new ways of looking at economic processes. So I had sort of a slow building. I'm not very intelligent, so it took me a long time to put all these things together. It was maybe even late in my career before I really became able to explain and support and my points of view. But it started with, you know, my personality defects, resisting authority and being contrarian, exposure to basic economics. So I had that framework, and then public choice, and then Austrian economics. So here I am.
So we talk about influential people. I want you to make a comment on Ayn Rand, philosophy, objectivism.
Yeah.
As far as I believe, as an individual, Ayn Rand inspires me. In her case for use of reason, use of knowledge, having self-esteem and being independent. But what is your comment about Ayn Rand?
Well, I have a funny story to tell about that. My father was a member of a book club when I was a teenager. And Atlas Shrugged was one of the first books, big books, that I encountered. I loved it. It was wonderful literature. But I don't know that I received any message from her that wasn't already in me. For me, I think back on Atlas Shrugged as just a wonderful piece of literature. That's my early experience. And then, of course, as I moved into my career, I became acquainted with her and her broad ideas that were compatible with my own. I'm not an objectivist. I don't like labels. I don't like to say I'm a libertarian. I don't like to say I'm this or that. I'm a human being.
Yes.
But I'm very close to many of Ayn Rand's ideas. I think she's a much better philosopher than academic philosophers believe. I think she was kind of kept out of the academic mainstream because she wasn't a professor, which was really a tragedy. It's part of the problem with university professors. They have egos and they protect their territory. But she has had a very large influence on the freedom movement, and I think she's an important figure.
Yeah, as we conclude, I have two questions. One will be related to Ayn Rand again, and the other one will be related to Frederick Buffett. But first, human nature is capitalistic.
Yeah.
Human nature is selfish. But why is it hard for people to understand that everyone, every morning, wakes up to pursue his own dream and then goes ahead to insult what drives them, what builds them, the system that has delivered them from poverty? Because it's capitalism that actually we see technology. It's capitalism that we've seen advanced education. It's capitalism that we've seen quality education and eradication of diseases, hunger and everything. But why don't people understand this and selfishly go on to insult?
You know, I really, in a way, it comes from our upbringing. If you have brothers and sisters, or if you have cousins, whatever, your parents would always say, you must make a sacrifice and give to them. So give your little brother some. So what they're doing, in a way, is suppressing your self-interest. They're saying his interest is above yours. So they're denying you this self-interest. So people begin to think, well, self-interest is a bad thing. My parents told me it was a bad thing, that I can't keep what is mine. So I think, we don't escape from those sort of early childhood sort of experiences when we begin to interpret the world around us. Sometimes churches, pastors will say, you must give. Well, no, you must give if you feel it is your moral desire to give. But you must not do anything that anyone tells you. I mean, you can go against God. It should be your choice. You may be punished for it, but it should be your choice. It should be all human action must be voluntary based upon the individual sense of morality. So I think there's people don't like self-interest because they think it's selfish. And I think selfish is too strong a word. I would say people are purposeful. I have a purpose in life. And that is my purpose, not yours. And it's my purpose, and that it is the right thing for me to do as long as I don't harm you.
Yeah, as you say, capitalism is a voluntary system. It's a system of value where individuals interact socially because of the exchange they want to reach out. And in the process, the end result is sent you from each side. You take from me what you want and also receive from you what you want. So it is very always difficult for people to understand that.
Even though they know that it's real, because they would never buy something unless it was worth more than what they gave up. But they can't build it into their brain as a concept. They don't see that, well, it's the market. This is what the market is. The market is me buying milk and having milk for my tea, and I'm better off, and the merchant is better off. Even though they have experience with that, they can't build it into their frame of reference.
Yeah, so Milton Friedrich said, what I can do, what the other can do, the government shouldn't intervene. That is the statement from Milton Friedman. Mm-hmm. Then Friedrich Barthet says, the law planners. Mm-hmm. Some men can make a law and make it cultural for people mm-hmm. to use it to exploit others. What is your comment about objective law? What should the law be? How should it be? Well,
again, we should think of the rules that govern us in two categories. There's legislation, which is parliamentary decisions based on partisan politics, ideology, or some elite that wants to control us. And then the other side is what I would call the rule of law, which is this evolutionary process that is spontaneous in the way it developed. We took from religious or moral experiences and built this into the rule of law. That eventually we got to the point where we understood that the rule of law would protect us from the abuse of power. And the power that is the most abusive and dangerous in all of our lives is political power. Because political power is hard to contest. It's hard to reduce. It's hard to escape. Now, economic power can be contested as long as there are competitors allowed to compete, that new technology will change political power, economic power, it will disappear. And our changing tastes and preferences or changing incomes will reduce economic power. So that is not a problem. The rule of law protects us from political power. That is a problem. And Bastiat gave us deep insights. Bastiat was a French thinker who was well beyond his years. I think he's underappreciated in terms of his simplifying very complex difficulties in organizing society. And he used these ideas and many anecdotes to give some of the most insightful descriptions of economic principles and ways of organizing society of any 19th century thinker.
The broken window is one of the most insightful.
Well, this is interesting. I mean, even economists can make big mistakes. Paul Krugman, after the 9/11 disaster in New York City, he said, well, this actually could be good for New York City because we will be rebuilding, so this will generate income. Well, this is absurd. Then we should have a war every day because you have to rebuild after a war. Wars don't make you richer. Destroying buildings don't make you richer.
Yes.
I mean, so this is what Bastiat called the broken window fallacy, that we can make this community richer by breaking every window and replacing. That's completely, it's unbelievable that a PhD in economist from Harvard, now at Columbia, Paul Krugman, who won the Nobel Prize in economics, knows nothing about economics.
Yes, as we conclude, I want to talk about policies. The policy of the good economists and the bad economists. That is under the broken windows. People tend to judge near things present, but they fail to judge the future. Today in Uganda, we have policies that are prohibitive, that are destructive, but the government seems not to understand them. That is the nature of politics we have. We have today, where we've been in Jinja, growing sugarcane, you need to first seek permission from government. You need to first get a license. Growing mira, there is a plant called mira, they chew it with chewing gum. So also growing it, you need, and most people have been prohibited or stopped from growing it. And to have it, you must grow, actually need to have 100 million Uganda shillings to get a license. Growing marijuana and the nature of government all over the world. The US government is actually trying to poke nose in people's liberty. What is so special that people do not understand that government is not supposed to be in economics, and people who are freely doing business without violating freedom, they must do their own business?
Well, I think there are two problems. One of them is conditioning, in the sense that you accept what the government says because it's the government and you believe in democracy and so on. But the real purpose of a political organization in modern times has always been to promote private property and human liberty. At least that's what modern democracy was envisioned to be. Unfortunately, modern democracy has become about political power, redistribution, and arbitrary judgments about how people should live, what they should grow. So we kind of accept, wow, what can we do? They're the government. We're powerless. We're not supposed to be powerless. The power should reside in the individual, and we should fight against that. The other thing is governments rely on experts that will sometimes confuse citizens, because they will always choose the expert that supports their view. They would never hire me to give them advice because I'd say, you're doing the wrong thing. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. They hire someone that says, I'm an expert. I have a PhD. It's what you're doing is good. Go ahead and borrow more money, make your country more indebted. But, these are destructive policies. So on one hand, the citizens are conditioned to accept authority. On the other hand, they hear from experts. And if you're not an expert, you say, well, he knows more than me. And I think we get trapped in that.
I think Frederick Bastiat talked about it. Every man is selfish, but when he's given a system that enriches him, he becomes more greedy. And that's power corrupt. Lord Ashton. As you conclude, what is your ending remarks? Your ending words?
Well, Karl Marx said, man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. Now, Karl Marx was very intelligent, but he was wrong in the sense that his idea was that we were trapped in a system of capitalism that exploited, alienated, and so on. In fact, we are in chains. The chains are from democracy. Democracy has been a divisive rather than a uniting force.
Democracy is a small dictator.
Yeah, and people who say they love democracy do not love liberty more.
Yes.
The original idea of modern democracy was to escape from arbitrary autocratic power of kings and emperors. And now we have arbitrary autocratic power of democratically elected officials. So in some way, we've gone from the fire into the frying pan. So if we are going to live a better life, whether in Uganda or in America, we need to, I think citizens need to understand that government powers need to be limited. Otherwise, they will be arbitrary.
We should have a limited government.
They'll be arbitrary, they're autocratic. They have the monopoly over the legal use of violence that they use against their citizens in an arbitrary, autocratic manner. So we have to protect ourselves. The problem is many of the rule changes we would like to see as a libertarian, they have to make the decisions. But that would give them less power. So it's very difficult to take power back from politicians and bureaucrats.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Chris, for honoring our call to come for this interaction.
Wonderful to be here.
Our viewers, thank you very much for listening. I've been hosting one of the greatest libertarian or free market, as he calls himself. He does not want libertarian because he does not want labor, but free market is a wide concept, philosophy that entails human prosperity, freedom, liberty, and the development we see, the prosperity we see. We shall be having other sources again. I'm Joram Mwesige. I believe I'm a capitalist and a libertarian.